We're talking open source again today with Daphne LaPrance-Rangay. And Daphne, I know that the latest article you did on open source got a lot of attention. There's a lot of people interested in this, and even more now is IBM coming out with a report talking about what skills developers need to get hired these days, and what's topping the list here.
So yes, as you said, it's a report that IBM carried out over almost 3,500 developers or hiring managers in the developer field. And the idea was to find out which skills as a developer you can hone and develop so that you are most likely to get hired, so that it sticks out on your CV as much as possible. And there was a very clear-cut finding from that report, and that is that open source skills will really get you far. Over 2,000 respondents said that they would prefer open source skills that are linked to the technologies that underpin the cloud specifically. So cloud open source skills seem to be really in demand. Among those skills, we have Linux, obviously, that comes out as a main skill. So over 95% of developers that answered said that Linux was very important to their career. But we also have other technologies like knowledge of container-based technologies or databases that are also quite key to the skills that hiring managers are after. And so this comes from a place of knowledge, if I may say. The people who answered this survey are all people who are familiar with open source. It's not just a buzzword. So most of the companies that were interviewed and surveyed by IBM reported using open source in one way or the other, and even 70% of them reported preferring open source cloud solutions specifically. So it's definitely a trend worth watching. And as a developer, if you're thinking about your next skills to develop and to work on, open source skills that are related to the cloud specifically are booming and are a skill that is really sought after by hiring managers.
Yeah, definitely. And talk a little bit about, or expand on, Daphne, that, where they intersect cloud and open source.
Yeah, so they're both trends that have been growing over the past years hugely, the cloud and open source technologies. And it turns out that they have grown in tandem for a good reason, is that open source software really complements the cloud. So as customers turn to cloud solutions, they're more and more keen to not be locked into a single vendor. So they'll be looking at different cloud solutions provided by different cloud vendors. And in that context, it makes a lot more sense to have an open source software that can run on different platforms rather than use a software program that is only tied to one cloud vendor, that is restricted to that cloud platform. Previous research by IBM showed that increasingly enterprises are looking to hybrid cloud and multi-cloud solution. On average, an enterprise has 8 different cloud providers. And that trend is only expected to grow as customers turn to more and more different cloud providers to have as stable and secure a solution as possible. If we look at the cloud providers themselves, we can see there's also a growth of open source solutions there. A lot of the cloud vendors now rely on open source programs and software. Google's Kubernetes is probably the most famous one. And actually in its report, IBM pointed to its own platform, OpenShift, which are developed with Red Hat, that is built on Google's Kubernetes platform. So it's definitely something that's growing as the cloud is growing, and that's what explains perhaps the fact that hiring managers are really after those skills that were underpinned cloud technologies.
And Daphne, anything in there about, is it still worth it to learn those proprietary software skills?
So it definitely seems like proprietary software has taken a backseat as open source skill demand has increased. Almost, or rather more than 9 in 10 respondents in IBM's survey reported thinking that open source skills are at least equal to proprietary software skill or better. And when it comes to developers themselves, more than half of them said that knowledge of only one cloud vendor's software was something that limited their career. On the other hand, developers who participated to open source projects and had knowledge of open source software and technologies reported better professional opportunities, often higher wages. So it definitely seems that like the balance is shifting in favor of open source. And so again, as a developer, it's definitely worth trying to contribute and trying your hand when it comes to joining the community of open source software development.
There's definitely a strong community of those in open source. That is for sure, Daphne. All right. Well, much more, of course, on IBM's report and a great deal of information on open source can be found on ZDNet. And we hope you will all check it out there. Thanks for watching.